In the land of Uz, there lived a man named Job. He was said to be blameless and upright, a man who feared God and turned away from evil. But what does it mean to be blameless in a world ruled by divine whims? Was Job truly virtuous or merely compliant? Was he wise or just obedient? He had wealth, children, livestock, a life curated by favor. He was devout, yes, but it was a devotion that operated more like a spiritual insurance policy, daily offerings, ritualistic sacrifices, anxious purification of his children just in case they had sinned. Job's piety was transactional, born not from enlightenment, but from fear of divine retribution. One day, the celestial council convened, and Satan, not yet the archenemy of later theology but a kind of divine prosecutor, entered God's court. What unfolds next is shocking. God himself boasts about Job, not for Job's benefit, but as a way to affirm his own standards. Satan challenges this, implying that God's morality is propped up by manipulation. He suggests that Job's loyalty is a result of his privileged treatment. What's most troubling is God's reaction. Instead of defending Job's free will or rejecting the cynical wager, God accepts it. He hands Job over, not out of necessity, not because Job did anything wrong, but to settle a philosophical dispute with Satan. In this version, Job becomes a pawn, a man stripped of agency, subjected to unimaginable suffering not because of his flaws, but because of his virtues. In a single day, Job receives 4 messengers. Each tells him of a new disaster. His livestock raided, his servants murdered, his children crushed to death in a storm. These are not symbolic tragedies. They are visceral, raw, and absolute. But ask yourself, where is justice in this? Is this an experiment? A trial run of how much suffering a man can endure before he breaks? The traditional story frames these events as tests of faith, but from a critical standpoint, they resemble acts of divine cruelty masquerading as moral tests. If omniscience is real, God already knew the outcome. So why proceed? For show? For proof? And Satan, often seen as a villain, merely verbalized what others might dare not say, that blessings manipulate faith, and that Job's reverence could be conditional. After the wave of catastrophes, Job does not curse God as Satan predicted. Instead, he mourns, shaves his head, and utters those now famous words, "The Lord gave, and the Lord hath taken away. Blessed be the name of the Lord." To the devout, this is a pinnacle of faith. But to a critic, this reaction raises a troubling question. Has Job internalized oppression so deeply that he praises the very force that allowed his destruction? This isn't stoic resilience. It might be spiritual Stockholm syndrome. Job remains loyal to a deity who just stood by while his life collapsed. But silence from heaven is not neutrality. It is complicity. God allowed it. Worse, God enabled it. And still, the experiment wasn't over. Satan returns to the divine court. Job has lost everything but remains faithful. Yet Satan raises the stakes. Take away his health, and then see what happens. Rather than declare Job's loyalty proven, God, again, grants permission to inflict physical suffering, boils, disfigurement, agony. And here's the theological dissonance. God is omnipotent, omniscient, and omnibenevolent. Yet he continues to subject a blameless man to torture. This is no longer a test. This feels more like performance theology, where suffering becomes a form of cosmic entertainment, a brutal public validation of a theological hypothesis. In this retelling, we begin to see God not as a protector of the innocent, but as an enabler of affliction for the sake of principle. Job's friends, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar, come to comfort him, but their comfort is wrapped in suspicion. They assume that Job must have sinned. After all, why else would just God permit such misfortune? This is divine justice as circular logic. If you're suffering, you must be guilty. If you're prosperous, you must be righteous. There is no room in this theology for innocent suffering. So Job's righteousness must be wrong. His pain becomes proof of hidden sin. These friends are not speaking for themselves. They are mouthpieces of religious orthodoxy, repeating the dogma that God is always just, therefore the afflicted must always be flawed. They do not question the system. They question the victim. But what if their reasoning is less about truth and more about protecting their worldview? If Job, the righteous man, can suffer unjustly, then the entire moral order collapses. So instead of comforting him, they attack him for their own psychological security. In this retelling, Job becomes the first theological whistleblower, the man who looks heaven in the face and says, "This is not right." He begins to dismantle the very assumptions his friends cling to, that righteousness guarantees reward, that suffering is always deserved. Job is not just defending himself. He is putting God on trial. At last, God speaks, but not to explain, not to apologize, not to reveal some redemptive arc behind Job's pain. Instead, God overwhelms Job with a barrage of rhetorical questions. Where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Can you command the morning? Do you give the horse its strength? God never tells Job why he suffered. He never mentions Satan. He doesn't clear up the cosmic bet. Instead, he shifts the focus from moral accountability to metaphysical authority. I am vast, unknowable, and mighty. Who are you to question me? From a controversial standpoint, this is divine deflection. Rather than engage Job's moral grievance, God responds with intimidation cloaked in majesty. It's a classic appeal to mystery. Suffering exists not because it's justifiable, but because it comes from a force too big to question. When the speech ends, Job recants, not because he has new understanding, but because he has been overwhelmed. And then, almost abruptly, God restores Job's fortunes, double the livestock, new children, long life. To traditional readers, this is redemption. But to a critic, it feels transactional, even hollow. What of the children who died? Are they replaced like cattle? What of the emotional wreckage? The trauma? Is this restoration or divine hush money? And God rebukes the friends, not for their cruelty, but because they did not speak of me what is right. Ironically, the one man who challenged God, the one who cried foul, is the one vindicated. So then, was Job right to question God all along? In this retelling, Job is not the passive saint we are often taught to admire. He is the challenger of cosmic silence, the voice of moral protest in a universe that seems to exalt might over mercy. His story is a mirror held up to the heavens, a demand for ethical accountability from the very source of law and order. And the disturbing beauty of it all, God does not punish him for it. If anything, the divine rebuke falls not on the angry Job, but on his well-meaning, orthodox friends who defended God with rigid dogma. It is as though the story whispers a dangerous truth. It is better to protest in honesty than to worship in fear. And if God is just, truly just, perhaps that is exactly what he wanted all along. In all you do, put your faith in the one and only true God. See you in our next video.